Good morning, everybody, and good morning, Dor from PTL. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Dominica. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, on this very grey morning here in July in the UK.
Yeah, I know. Very topical.
um, yeah, I mean, I don't know where the sun's gone, but I thought that we would do a vlog this morning on operations.
Mm.
And this is often something that brands think and ask us, why do I even need to bother about ops, Domenica? I've come to you about marketing. And what so many brands don't realize is your operational structure will actually determine what you can and can't do in China, what you're allowed to do in China. And so I'm welcoming Dor this morning, who is an operational expert. And at Emerging Communications, we use PTL in China for an awful lot of our operational structures and our support. So thank you very much for your time today. Very much appreciated. I've got a lot of brands that will be very interested in what you've got to say. So do you want to just do a really quick intro as to who PTL are, what you do, before we move on to talking about what the options are for brands? That'd be great.
So in short, PTL Group is, I like to call us a China market enabler. We help companies to enter, operate, and if we do our job right, to grow in the Chinese market.
Yeah.
And what that really means is that we're not a biz dev firm, we're not a consultancy. What we really are is a backbone, an operational backbone on which companies can either kind of outsource all of their operational needs to, or, and this is kind of a more later stage approach and model that we advise our clients, is to set up a company through our channels and have our team manage it. So it's almost the beauty of it is that it's a malleable and at times more cost-effective way to enter and to work in China.
Do you want to just summarize before we get into a little bit more depth as to what the options are for a brand that is new to the China market in terms of operating structures?
So there's actually quite a knowledge gap, I'd say, around the potential routes that are available to companies kind of at the onset of their journey. And generally, you know, when companies, they'll go to either a lawyer or a law firm, of course, or a chamber of commerce, and they'll be told normally one of three things. It's either to sell and partner with a local Chinese distributor. The next is to register a representative office or to kind of execute a joint venture with a Chinese party or stakeholder. And the final option, and undoubtedly the most kind of widespread, is to register their own Chinese entity called a Wolfie, which stands for a wholly foreign-owned entity.
Yeah.
So there are positives and negatives to each, and I'll just quickly run through all of them.
Okay.
So working with distributors is undoubtedly the easiest way to sell and to start selling in China in terms of the time to market and the convenience. And I just wrote an article about distributors where I kind of commented on the misconception around them as these quote unquote super partners that promise you an endless pool of Chinese consumers and resources and just the ability to from day one sell across all of China with little work or investment needed on the part of the brand or the company. And the problem with this kind of promise is that it's very superficial, and there's once I think companies kind of tick into this relationship with partners, they realize how empty that promise really was. Most distributors have or tend to have at least these captive markets, and they will struggle to repeatedly sell or increase the sales of your products once they've saturated there relatively. And I say relative because China is such a huge market that at the onset you will think that you're performing amazingly, but in reality you have such a small slice of the pie, and that small slice of the pie is really all that your distributor will be able to offer you. And then you'll roll on and you'll realize that they've saturated their consumer base, their contingency group, and they won't be able to expand into the other provinces, the other demographics, the other sectors that you really want to be hitting as a brand or a service provider or anyone with anything to sell in China, really. And the other thing that kind of companies need to bear in mind is that distributors will always own and leverage the things that they own in terms of their sales and operational channels over your head, because that's the power that they have kind of above you. Like, why would they divulge to you what who your consumers are, how the best way is to sell to them? Because if they tell you those things, you could ultimately run off and do them by yourself.
Right.
So there's always kind of a trade-off and a conflict of interest. And the final and the most crucial point to consider is that distributors are businesses, and like other businesses, they need to make money. So once your product begins to kind of teeter and to not sell as effectively, they will stop promoting it. They won't work as hard. Their loyalty only kind of sits with you for as long as your product is making them money. And if it stops making them money, then they'll stop working with you.
Okay. Is it a good start? Sorry to interrupt. Is it a good starting point for, say, a brand, a retail brand that wants to test the market and wants to keep their investment fairly low, their risk fairly low, provided they take the right advice? If it's not PTL, they take the right advice in market to make sure that distributor agreement and the contracts between both parties are going to protect the brand. Is it a good low risk option for your kind of tipping your toe in the water, would you say?
So I know I've just kind of given a lot of doom and gloom around distributors. It's not, if managed effectively, and this is something that we do with a lot of our clients, it can be a massive advantage. And that's something that I wanted to touch on later.
Okay, great.
The problem with distributors, as I mentioned, is that leverage. It's the fact that they own their sales, your sales channels, they import your products, they hold the business licenses, they have the captive markets. But if you set up and if you establish yourself in a way where you're not completely reliant on one distributor, you can actually manage and negotiate arrangements with several distributors. And then you'll get more favorable deals, of course, because distributors will say to you, you know, I'll import your product and I'll take X kind of cut of your China revenues. And you'll say to them, you know, with all due respect, I don't need you to operate my channels. I can import my product. I can sell independently. And then when you come at the relationship with a much stronger bargaining position, you can really benefit from them, because distributors are they're distributors for a reason, and they distribute tens or hundreds or thousands of products depending on the distributor sizes, again, for a reason, because they do have sway and they do have the potential to sell. So it's about managing that relationship correctly and effectively. That's kind of the thing to hammer home, is there's no one distributor can sell across all of China for you. Exclusive distributorships are always a mistake, no matter how big or impressive that distributor might seem. But if managed correctly and effectively, there's really a lot that you can do to benefit from them. And again, if you're not benefiting from them, you can end a relationship with a distributor and carry on working in China. It doesn't impact your sales. You won't all of a sudden disappear off the face of the Chinese market. Representative offices give you the ability to employ and to rent out an office in China to promote your product or your services or your brand. But you have no transactional capabilities. You can't buy or sell anything. Your business license scope is very limited. You can't set up an ICP license, things like that. So it's not kind of a loophole around that.
Rep offices, though, can be quite a good way in for, say, a university or a professional services organisation, a consultant that wants to put one person on the ground and can't employ them because they don't have a foreign enterprise in China.
I think that the main point to hammer home here is that there's a lot of forethought that needs to go into the type of entity and the type of structure that you set up in China.
Yeah.
And it's just a quick fix because I need X, Y, or Z done in China. There's kind of a future impact and significance to any of the decisions made today.
Yeah.
And so that kind of rolls us on quite nicely to Wolfies and to speaking about Wolfies.
Yeah.
So Wolfies are certainly a really good option for some international companies who are looking to, do business in China. But the problem with Wolfies is that so many companies are misguided on when to set it up or why they might actually need one. And they set it up without understanding that, and there's kind of almost this double-edged sword that's going on here, because it's easier today than it ever has been in the past to set up a Wolfie and to register it. And, you can do it in a month or a matter of a couple of months, which by previous timelines is very, very good. The problem is actually closing that Wolfie should the worst happen, and should you actually need to, leave China. There's lots of risks and liabilities that come with setting up a company that people aren't really told at the onset of their China journeys. And we kind of have this golden rule, this three-pronged approach at PTL Group. And we say that you should, ideally have two of these, but at least one of them in order to justify setting up a Wolfie. The first is when you benefit from a decent market share, when you've really validated your product and you have a stable income in your China business. The second is if you've hired, and this is really important, that you have several employees who understand your core business and can work independently, because the day-to-day proceedings of your China Wolfie, as if you're managing remotely, which most international companies are, will be managed by someone on the ground in China. Most of the time they'll be Chinese. That would be kind of our advice. And you need to feel assured and trusted, especially, you know, in the wake of coronavirus, of the difficulties of traveling over to China. You need to be confident that your team in China can handle and can be on brand and on point with the things that you're trying to promote and sell.
Yeah.
The third point is a bit more kind of technical. It's about business licenses. We mentioned ICP licenses. So it's for various kind of business license activities, like bidding for government tenders. I mentioned ICP licenses. So those are kind of the three. And if you have one or two or all of the above, that's when we'd say it's a smart and sensible time to set up a Woofie.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I kind of wanted to touch on a fourth option, which is kind of scrolling back to our work and our services, which is often kind of omitted from the conversation of what people can do. And the technical term for a company like ours, like PTL Group, is a fulfillment agent. And the approach that we've kind of championed throughout our 20 years of activity. So again, Woofies give you that transactional presence that rep offices don't.
Right.
So again, we mentioned a setup like a university, which is fully kind of working overseas. But then you have like a brand who's trying to set up like an offline store or a service provider that wants to transact in China. They want to contract for their services. You need a Woofie to do that. Now, there are other routes, and this is something that I wanted to touch on. PTL offers a service of kind of operational outsourcing, and we can actually help companies in the pre-entity stage to both transact and to employ staff in China. So we mentioned kind of dipping your toe in the water. It's a way to dip your toe, and if you need to kind of dive right in, right? Because you have that malleability that comes with being able to transact, sell, import products, and you can do so in a way that suits you best. If you're not selling in China, then there's no need to kind of activate those channels that we own and that we provide. So it's an interesting approach, but certainly for companies who are well established in China and who are needing to issue invoices and who have an established team that they want to employ, then Woofies are the way to go.
How operationally are you seeing either challenges or opportunities arise in light of post-COVID China?
So that's a really, really good question. And I think putting challenges and opportunities in almost the same breath really kind of encapsulates the dynamic or the situation that we have before us. You know, we have already, I have this expression that pressure can make diamonds, and it's so true for a post kind of COVID or a in perpetuity with COVID world that we now live in. And I'd say that the main thing which you kind of touched on is, and this was something that was already happening in China and that we've kind of flirted with throughout this conversation, is the digitalization of the economy. I mean, we've mentioned e-commerce, we've mentioned the big e-commerce players. They are and will continue to be more ever present in kind of Chinese daily life. Companies and sector verticals that historically weren't online will be going online, and it's an unavoidable trend as far as we're concerned on operational sides. I'm sure that you would agree on the marketing. Online cannot be ignored any longer. That's the first and the most substantial trend as far as we see. The second is actually kind of, I mean, you could call it outsourcing, but you could also just call it trusting in your local parties or your local people on the ground, your boots on the ground, your partner, whatever it may be. The kind of the physical distance between China and the rest of the world, the physical barriers to entry have arguably never been greater in kind of the 20th century, 21st century. And what that means and entails is that for the international companies who are wanting to succeed in China, you need to really have strong support and strong presence. And whether that's in employees, in partners, it can be in distributors, it can be in online presence, it can be in your marketing, whatever it is, you need to know that from afar or kind of even remotely and independently, that your your services, your products, your brand, whatever it is being communicated and sold effectively. And that's kind of the main takeaway, is that you need to have strength and assurance from afar.
I think you've touched on a really important point. So in terms of sort of opportunities and threats across the board post-COVID, obviously China is a very, very, very important economy, the number one economy in the world now. Absolutely. And very important to brands. But there are also other things going on that brands will be concerned about, the political side, any legal issues. So that's an even more of a bigger reason, isn't it, to work with an established player in China and not to go it alone, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I'd say that there are so many things that can and do go wrong along the China journey, and not to kind of cast this grey cloud of inability or uncertainty in terms of how to sell in China. But I'm sure you'll agree that, I mean, how many times have you met with a client, or they've come and they've spoken to you about what they've done, and you've said to them, politely, of course, you've done it all wrong. You've made so many mistakes that we kind of warn and threaten, that we warn clients of not making. And there's kind of two prongs to this, or three almost. There's execution of sales, there's operations, and then there's communication of your product and your brand and your services. And there are so many nuances and things that should be just right from the onset. Yeah. And I'd say that's where kind of our worlds meet, yours being kind of in marketing and consultancy, and ours being in operations.
Yeah.
It's really understanding both that is so crucial to ensuring that you're communicating your product effectively, that you're engaging with Chinese consumers in the way that you want to.
Yeah.
And that you're just essentially giving off the right image and operating effectively. It's all of those things. They're not mutually exclusive. It's not that one will kind of carry you over. I think you put this very, very beautifully, that your marketing can only be as good as your operational platforms. And the same holds true for the perverse. You could have amazing operational infrastructures, but if you don't have a strong marketing and kind of a brand presence, it's pointless.
If you were to give 3 snippets of advice for the audience on this, both podcast and vlog,
sure, what
would they be for how to set about choosing your operational structure for China?
So the first, and I feel like you've absolutely hammered this home, is to do your homework, and kind of in line with doing your homework is to map out a plan and a strategy for where you want to go.
Yeah.
So absolutely agree with you. I couldn't have said it better myself if I tried. There needs to be a plan, and that plan doesn't have to be, refined to a minutia of detail. It needs to be, this is what our product is, this is what we feel our consumer might be. Can we validate that through, the amazing work that you guys do at EC? And then the second stage is, once you've made that plan, is to sit with, it doesn't have to be us, anyone who understands operational landscapes in China, and to map out, how do we actually go about executing that plan? Yeah. Is it right to outsource certain kind of functions at first? Is it right to outsource our employment and our invoicing before we've really validated, before we've launched that pilot scheme? We work with lots of startups who are looking for investment. So until they get that investment from a Chinese suitor, they want to outsource their kind of business presence in China. And then, it's a different ballgame once they've been acquired.
Yeah.
And the third is to be active and to constantly, and to be in touch with China. I mean, I always give this example, that if you were a company that was trying to sell, a UK or a London-based company trying to sell in Scotland, and you set up a subsidiary office there, you wouldn't leave it for months or even weeks on end without speaking, without touching, without getting in touch, without speaking and seeing how are things going, how's Scotland receiving my products or services. But for some reason, and the reasons are, of course, the physical and cultural barriers that exist with China, that doesn't fortunately happen. And we have clients, and we've had clients in the past that we berate about, engage with your team, make sure that they're happy and that they're excited to be working for you, that they understand what their goals and objectives are, that they're in line with that plan that we just kind of mentioned that you so crucially need. It's
Yeah.
You get as much as you give, and as much as you put into your China business. It's there's no two ways about it. It's not some magic trick or some lucky formula. It's about hard work. It's about engagement. It's about correct planning, and it's about the right partners. It's all of those things in one.
Thank you very much, Dor. So if potential clients want to get in touch with you, how might they do that if they're interested in talking about ops?
Of course, yeah. So they can go to our website. It's www.ptl-group.com, or they can email me at dor@ptl-group.com. You can find me on LinkedIn, any channel, and we'd be more than happy to discuss anybody who has an operational or kind of executional need in China.
Thank you very much. And same goes for emerging communications.
Yeah.
Anybody who has any issues around marketing or marketing consultancy in mainland China or targeting global Chinese consumers. Thank you very much, Dor. Really appreciate your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Have a lovely afternoon, and I will be talking to you very soon. Thank you.